AIVANHOV. July 20, 2019. Interviews figures. Well, dear friends, I'm extremely happy to find you and to find some that I have never seen before. We will, if you will, after having brought you all my blessings and all the peace possible, continue to dialogue, to exchange, to testify, to answer your questions, obviously placing ourselves automatically in the idea that all this is only a dream and that there is no one. So of course, we avoid, as much as possible, questions that are too intimate to really talk, if possible, about the general processes you're going through. And from that point on, and that being said, please accept all my blessings. In a few moments we will start listening to what you have to say, to ask or to exchange. Silence. So dear friend, if you have a first question we will listen to it all together. Voice. So a sister's first question. I've been alone for a few years. Life gives me to live, there now, a story, a relationship with a man who lives very far from me. What to understand about that? Was it written or is it my little person who wants to live it? What difference do you make between what you want and what is written? Even what you want from your little person is written. In either case, it is written. And the choice you will make is also necessarily written. I can't tell you to decide this or that, but I remind you, as you said yourself, that this man doesn't live near you. It may be one of the best ways to live a relationship without being each other, but to live the relationship from one to the other, at a distance. If it is decided by your little person or registered in your eternity anyway, you know it. Today, the simulacrum and the sacred meet and are lived in the same way. It's the two sides of the same coin. On the one hand there is a simulacrum, but any simulacrum is only a sacred one that has not yet been unmasked, if I may say so. So you don't have to worry about whether it comes from you or whether it is something that is sent to you, as you would say, by the intelligence of the light. It doesn't matter since the simulacrum and the sacred are now, I would say, hand in hand and spouses, even if they're moving away from each other, it is the period of the crossing. So accepting what is offered to you, even if it comes from an unfulfilled desire, no longer makes any difference. What is to be lived belongs to you. The decision is yours. I would simply say, and I repeat to you that, depending on this distance and not this proximity, there is perhaps precisely and perhaps the possibility of living by being one in the other without being one next to the other, of course, and therefore perhaps to consider another type of relationship or functioning within what is called the couple or affinities that live one with the other, but together. That's a hypothesis. But in any case, asking yourself if you have a choice and asking yourself if it comes from your desire, or if it's written and it doesn't depend on your desire, I would answer you that it comes from both, of course. And everything that is happening right now, you know it or even if you don't know it, is exactly what you need to live the truth, no matter what happens to you. And the principle of accepting what is not a choice, but allows the freedom of choice to express itself no longer from the person but from the arrangement of life itself. The personal choice, linked to history, memory, past experiences, is a non-place as a question. Because even your desire that you would identify as the desire of the little person would only translate the action of the intelligence of the light. And you don't have to wonder about the usefulness or uselessness of such a meeting at this time of year. Live what is to be lived, following what is easy, what is evident, and also what makes you deeply happy. But if you put the question in front of you, on the one hand it means that you are afraid of making mistakes, of making the wrong choice. And if you think you have a choice, bad or good, it means you're not free. The real freedom is to let things happen here too. So of course, the notion of distance from domiciles is, in this case, probably an opportunity for the person as well as for the intelligence of the light. No longer make any difference even to your desires. When changes occur, even if you previously had a feeling of loneliness or lack inside, it doesn't matter. What happens must happen, what doesn't happen. So don't ask the question of choice. As soon as you put the choice in front of you, it just proves that you are not free to make that decision. What you engage is experience or non-experience. And as long as you ask yourself whether it is your person who has expressed this wish, this desire, even unconsciously, or whether it is sent to you by the light, you cannot understand or live that it is the two aspects of the same piece. Whether it is your desire, or whether you have no desire and it manifests itself, whether it is the intelligence of the light or something else does not make any difference. What is to be lived is to be lived. What is not to be lived, whatever you do, will not be lived. So don't put the notion of choice or decision in front of you. Instead, let me say the choice be made on its own, without you, without needing to compensate for a lack or deficiency, and without having projected an idol or anything. It is the intelligence of life, the intelligence of light that goes as you release yourself this notion of having to choose or of hesitating that things will become clearer. Drop the question and the answer will appear to you. It couldn't be clearer. That's what I have to say. And my answers, of course, take into account the preamble I gave you concerning that now, you are no longer in scenarios to be built on a personal level, but to assume and light what is presented, I would say without delay, without hesitation and without decision. Just observe what is happening, both in your effects and in the effects of the hypothetical future companion, and see how things are going. I remind you that whatever you choose, what is in direct resonance with the intelligence of the light, whatever the circumstances, will happen anyway. And the more you accept not to choose and to really let life achieve what it must achieve, the more you will be more and more sure the accuracy or falsity of what is proposed to you. But it will no longer be a choice. It will be linked to an observation that no longer comes from the mind but comes directly from the facts. Is it easy to set things up easily, or is it slowed down somewhere? So it is the observation of circumstances that creates freedom, not the fact of having to choose. Either easy and simple, it's the light. Either gets complicated and more complicated, then you can be sure that it is not the light, whatever you want or whatever you don't want. Silence. We can continue. Brother. So the second question from a sister who is present. Hello OMA, thank you for being here. Many of us are living through the tremors and the spreading of wings. Can you shed some light on that? Oh, it's very simple. The inner tremor that occurs, I remind you, in brothers and sisters who have not gone through the energies, through vibration necessarily, this tremor can affect the whole body, only the legs, only the chest. It is an inner tremor that is the change of molecular state, and the atomic state, especially of carbon that turns into silica, that naturally transfers your consciousness that inhabits this physical body, that is in this physical body, to consciousness and to the living in the eternal body. It is not a becoming. It is the real and concrete superposition of the ephemeral and the eternal. Of course, wings are a reality. Whatever your stellar origin, many of you are in deep feeling, at the same time as this tremor, different sensations in your shoulders and back of your back that reflect the real, perceived presence of these wings that are now returning. You have nothing to consider but to see that in this, that it is there. And above all, don't be interested, without that you will reinforce the perception and the feeling, of course, but which will not bring you anything other than to tremble is even more so. I would say that if the tremor doesn't catch you in immobility, keep doing what you were doing, ignore it. But it indicates, and I said it not long ago, just 2 or 3 weeks ago, that this is the reality of the purpose of the transubstantiation process, that is, to move from one form to another. But this form to another is not accompanied by any interruption of consciousness as, for example, during death or a coma, on the contrary. It is a lucidity, I would say more and more pointed, more and more clear, of what is happening. and the wings are obviously linked to the body of eternity, to the body of glory if you will, which is present as I said, and as has been said by many speakers, in all incarnate human brothers and sisters, whether they have the perception, the sensation, or not. Let things be, they are being done, I remind you now without you. You do not need to focus your attention, your consciousness, on any vibrator or transubstantiation process, which is in fact the disappearance of the vital body and the physical body to leave room for the bodies of eternity at the moment of the event. But don't worry about that. Instead, be more and more aware of what is happening at every moment of your life here on Earth. There is no need to search for entities, a history, or a future of anything. The more you are inserted in the present instant, the clearer you will see. And at that moment you discover that you are in joy, even if the instant before you were was sadness, in fear or in anything. But the simpler you are, the more you accept your life, which does not prevent you from doing what is necessary. But to already accept the present instant, whatever your life, whatever the story, makes you instantly live the truth. And it is the same truth, absolute, for all human consciences. There are no prerequisites as Ebo would say, there are no preconditions, there are no stories to tell. You are fully here and now, or you are elsewhere, in your head, in fears, in what you are going to do tomorrow, in emotions that go back to yesterday, whatever. The present instant is totally free of your own mind, totally free of emotion, totally free of history. It is zero time, it is where there is no one, and it is where you discover by living it the truth of who you are, beyond the character, beyond your own life. As has been said, you are life. And you don't need an alibi, you don't need to rely on invisible subtle spiritual planes, but you need to be fully there, fully present, without asking yourself questions. If you were to do it for 2 minutes, I'm not talking about alignment, I'm not talking about meditation, I'm not talking about prayer, I'm not talking about asking for something, but just accepting what's there. I am not talking about accepting even your suffering or your lack, but about accepting what is, that you do not know. And at that moment you are living it, I would say in an increasingly fast way. And of course, as has been said, you can only recognize yourself through this joy, this lightness. Of course, the person, of course, will not disappear. Until the last moment you will always have your husband, your wife, your profession, your children, unless life decides otherwise. But then you will see that your point of view, as Bhatti said, the way you see and experience things is totally different, and that naked joy, this evidence of the present instant, can only grow with every minute of it. The more confident you're in what you are living and not in what you are told, the more true and authentic you are, whatever your age, whatever your life. Whether you are male, women, whether you are in a family, whether you are alone, whether you are rich, whether you are poor, has no impact or limitation on this essential truth of the present instant. Today you have a total freedom to be in that present instant, provided you are sincere with yourself already, and with this present instant. In the present instant, as you know, there is no place for yesterday, there is no place for tomorrow, there is no place for what is at this instant. At that moment, if the acceptance is total, the evidence will emerge and you will live it instantly. You do not need to rely on a light entity, or on a brother or sister, or on any advice. That's also what autonomy is all about. And that at the level of absolute truth. 1. You have no choice, as we saw in the previous question, and 2. You can only recognize yourself beyond identity and beyond your life. This is how today you simply become life, and that, of course, the person's life will call changing at all levels. But it's not from you. It is the discovery and living of truth that is the same for everyone, and that is not inscribed in form or history or in the past or in the future, that will make you live the truth in an increasingly constant way. It means accepting to let go of any pretense to look for anything. It means accepting that you cannot understand it intellectually, even after reading thousands of pages or thousands of explanations, and that it is the gift of grace, the gift of love, which needs no other circumstance than your presence in the eternal instant of the here and now. It is so simple and so true that, of course, your person, your story, your fears if any remain, or your beliefs, are your own limits that you have put in front of the truth. If you really and sincerely accept the instant, you live the truth. It's as simple as that. Silence. But this abandonment, this sacrifice, this ego, will do everything, of course, even at the level not really conscious, to tell you that it is not true, that it is not possible, that it does not exist, that you must first do this, that you must first solve this problem. It is not true. These are injunctions from your character, injunctions from history, from your past references, or from your fears of the future, or from your habits, but nothing else. The truth is never there. The truth is zero time. There are enough of you to live agape and naked joy, to know that it is authentic for those who live it and for those who see you living or who frequent you. They can only see that there may be some form of distance between what comes from you, even if it is not felt as energy and vibration. The one who is true, does not need speeches and does not need postures. He has nothing to show you. He has nothing to explain to you, even if he can explain a lot of things. But it is precisely the fact that he is present to himself that makes you discover and light your presence. Everything else is just a set, whether it's the music, whether it's my words, whether it's the postures that the head chief shows you, whether it's the pronunciation of certain words, once again it's a set. But a setting I would say more suitable to allow you to get closer and light the present instant. As long as you believe that something is distant from you, or that something is missing, you maintain the distance and you maintain the lag. It is not positive thinking, it is not the law of attraction, it is the strict truth. I repeat, what is emerging in the collective consciousness at this time, and not just for a few masters or brothers and sisters who live agape, is simply if you accept, without reticence and without conditions, you are free, immediately. And you can only experience and feel the freedom to be, the freedom of spontaneity. And even this word sacrifice that frightens the ego, the mind, is more like a song for children. There is no sacrifice in truth. There is the truth or what is not the truth. Of course, for the ego, for the person, it has been called a sacrifice, but there is no sacrifice. The discovery of the truth and the living of the truth is an acquisition of something that has always been there, always, that has never been able to disappear, but the habits, conditioning, everything that happens on the surface of this world, of all worlds, simply prevent you from living. You see, if you accept this simplicity, and especially if it seems extremely complicated to you because your ego, your character will say yes but I have children, yes but I have a husband, yes but I have a profession, but the living liberated, they don't care what they have, this or that. They have been in the balance much more available for the truth of the being than for any form of acquisition whatsoever. You have nothing to acquire in relation to the truth. It seems to you like an acquisition at first, but it is simply the discovery of the truth that has always been there. So change your eyes, yes. Look really and concretely beyond history, inside you, not to ask yourself the question of who you are. And I am not talking about your identity here. You're the truth. Affirm this truth in all humility and simplicity, and it is over. In this way you stop the motor of suffering, the mind. You stop the physical suffering without wanting to heal anything. You stop the story and, of course, you stop everything that makes sense to be just an identity. You are, of course, an identity, and you will be until the last moment of your incarnate life. But you are in an entity, you are not that entity or this identity, that's all. Accept this and the rest will be experienced and revealed of its own accord, naturally. But if it seems to you that you are making the slightest effort to want to improve, to want to understand, you are not there. You're just getting away from the truth. Today that's how it works. Listen, read the testimonies of brothers and sisters who are truly free. This freedom, as has been said, is not only internal, it is also external. It will therefore be translated into reality. And you will find that no more subjugation, no more predation, be it of the companion, the children, the family, the society itself, represents anything. This does not mean that you will become a hermit, that you will necessarily isolate yourself from the world, quite the contrary. You will be alive in the dream that is freedom. That's where you are happy, only there, and nowhere else. As long as you believe you have to acquire something, you create time and space. And you create the distance between you and the truth. Again, these are not words to believe, what I am telling you here is not a teaching. This is the truth that everyone can live immediately. You do not need to rely on any spirituality. You do not need to rely on any energy or chakra opening. Of course, ever, head of the head and others still talk to you about the chakras, sometimes about the gates and stars, sometimes even about the Marian Canal or the different vibratory structures. But I assure you that everything you built that was useful to get to today is a dead weight. True freedom does not depend on energy or vibration or circumstance or chakra. It simply depends on your authenticity. Authenticity with yourself is, above all, not feeling guilty, because there is this and because there is no this. But simply to accept things as they are. Accepting that things as they are only there to prove to you through your lived experience that you are the truth. So, do not add any distance, remember that the experience of the present instant is the understanding of life, not of your life but of what life is, of what is the dream, of what is the creation. You don't have any more questions, because when you're true you know you found yourself. And at that moment, of course, there is no energy, no chakra, no circumstances that hold even if, of course, if you feel your chakras, you feel the crowns, you feel the vibrations, you feel the tremors, the winds and other things. But the truth is enough for itself. She doesn't need a set and, above all, she doesn't need you, that's who you are. The simpler you are, the more able you are to live the truth. The more spontaneous you are, the more authentic you are, the more you agree, the more you accept, even if afterwards you have to move your buttocks, for example, in relation to any decision whatsoever. But put acceptance ahead of what you think you have to choose, ahead of what you think you should decide or acquire or suppress. If you adopt this process, you become free but instantly. And if you don't live it, it means that you are not yet authentic enough and sufficiently present in the here and now. It is that somewhere on the subconscious level, on the unconscious level, somewhere you are attached either to your history, or to your feeling of being an individual, or simply to fears or habits. But you don't need to know these fears, you don't need to search these habits, it's the same for all incarnated human brothers and sisters, but simply to accept that it's so, and the crossing is done automatically. And at that moment you are the truth. This will not prevent you from having to do it afterward, but everything will be done with much more simplicity and lightness. Accept to be simple and light, because the truth is simple and light and you will live it, instantly. One more question. Voice. There was a second question and it was also answered, but I will tell you anyway. Will the wings have a function before the end even if it is part of the ephemeral? No, the body of eternity, as they say the immortal body, is a garment, a costume that is indeed immortal, but it is not you. You're anterior to any form, you are naked joy, you love and nothing else. Everything else is just passing through. Your life, your feelings, your affects, your wealth, your poverty simply belong to the circumstances that you yourself have, whatever you say, decided to live to end this dream. And then everything becomes light, everything becomes easy. Of course, you can have fun with your wings, you can lighten your weight. It is with this that many of you the previous year went out in naked consciousness or in a body, a costume if you prefer light whatever its shape. You are not dependent. And those who traveled in naked consciousness lived it, were not subject to your stellar origin. You could borrow any body of light. The bodies of light like any form are only clothes, costumes that you wear to walk through the dream space, nothing more and nothing less. You're anterior to the form. You're the pure agape love. You're the originator of the dream. You are the origin of the Savior, but you are also the origin of predation. All this is in you. You don't need to find him today. You just need to find yourself in the truth. And this truth is there for everyone, no matter what you think, no matter what you live or do not live. So, the wings, yes, of course, some even manage to spread and feel the spread of their wings in the back. This is not an illusion. Without it, you are millions dreaming that you have wings. But these wings are concretely there, and when the wings are there and perceived, it means that everything that is linked to the vital body has died out in favor of the vibrational body that sets your heart on fire, that is, in the fire of the sacred heart, in the evidence of impersonal love. You are free from all attachments, all suffering, all emotions, all fears and all projections. And you can only love it if you are, I repeat, authentic, spontaneous, and true. The best illustration of acceptance at the time is, of course, what little Teresa of Lisieux told you at the time. It is the way of innocence and childhood, but stripped of all the religious ornaments that existed at the time, because there were no other possibilities. Today, you no longer need any scenery, you no longer need beliefs, you no longer need hope. You need total faith in the present instant and in the truth of the instant. And you're just living it. It really creates, not only inner freedom in relation to your own history, habits, conditioning, suffering, freedom in relation to your projections, but you can only see that outer freedom that appears at that moment when you no longer feel held or obliged by any emotional, societal, moral, professional or legal circumstances. That doesn't mean you're going to violate the laws or violate morals. But you have the distinct clarity that you no longer depend on that and that you are no longer subject to that. Such is Agape's joy. Such is the joy of freedom. We can continue. Voice. So, a question from a sister present. My grandmother lost her brother and one of her sons. My mother lost her brother and one of her children. I also lost my brother and I am afraid of losing a child. How can we overcome this fear? But think that if you lose a child, your ego, your person will feel grief. But place yourself from the point of view of the one who was locked up. He is released, he is not dead, he is alive. Reverse things. When you lose something and someone, of course, on a human level, there is grief, loss. But go beyond that. Don't consider your narrow, historical, family point of view. But accept that this brother, this grandmother, well, all the people you said who died in the family, they are free. It is the ego's point of view to believe that death is an end, that death deprives you of anything. Yes, it deprives your ego, your story. But the one who lives in freedom today, remember Nisargadatta, he explained to you that when his wife died, he was dancing around the bed. Of course, he was free. You're not free, so you're afraid. You can't overcome the fear on your own there too. Believing this only reinforces fear. Accept your fear and accept to welcome it, so accept to cross it and you can only laugh at yourself rather than be afraid. You will live the truth. But everything that stands out in your lives today and that does not translate into fear somewhere, or a break with habits, is there only to allow you to discover yourself. So don't feed fear, otherwise through your question, you are still looking where there is nothing to find. That is a fact. This fact that family members leave, must be seen, accepted, not by seeking to oppose or protect themselves against their own children. Without it, you only demonstrate through your questioning an attachment to form, an attachment to family, an attachment to illusion, to dream. There's never any joy in that, you know that. And to be rid of fear, you can't oppose your own fears. Today, they will be strengthened. There is no how, there is no solution within the person. Accept your own fear, face it, accept that this fear passes through you, but do not stop it with your thoughts or cogitations. Let it appear, it will disappear in the same way as it appeared, as soon as you do not hold it back by your thoughts or by memories or by fear. At the time I was saying, fear or love. Today, you will see it without exception, it is love or suffering. And this applies to all levels of society, humanity or peoples, in every possible way. When everything is secure in your wallet, in your husband, in your children, when you have enough to live on, you never question yourself. You're in safety, in illusory safety certainly, and you forget that one day you will leave, because it is always later. It's always tomorrow. Do not disturb your sense of security. But the search for security or security itself, ultimately beyond social and personal laws, is only a reflection of fear. If the artist had to ask himself if he was going to sell his canvas before making it, he would never make a canvas or it would be missed. The spontaneity of life is accepting what happened. You can't change anything in the past. But don't stick this past in the future, without it you are not in the present moment. And of course, there can only be suffering and fear. Fear of loss, fear of missing, fear of lack of security. But it is always the person who seeks security, never the truth. The truth is the spontaneity of the instant. She doesn't care about tomorrow. It is a life that is no longer personal, but that is where you have sacrificed yourself and are free. But you can't be sure something and lie the truth at the same time. It's one or the other. Truth is an inner certainty, it is agape, it is naked joy. Everything else is totally uncertain and can never be sure, and whoever is free doesn't care about tomorrow. He is so immersed in the happiness, the beatitude of the instant that he has no time to spend on the past or the future, whatever the responsibility of a child, a family or an obligation of any kind. Your freedom has no price, there is no price. Nothing can buy freedom. And when you live it, you know it well. But as long as you do not live it, of course, the human, personal logic of the ego, of the person, will do everything to make you find security, to avoid death and especially of your loved ones, not to suffer, not to face lack. But I repeat to you that the one who is free, of course, will not kill his parents or children, but he accepts death, because he knows that death is not an end, but the true beginning of true life, especially now. I am not making an apology for death, because there is no death for the truth. The truth was never born, it will never die. And today by the circumstances of the dream, by the circumstances of the creation that you have decided and that you have forgotten, of course, that we had all forgotten. We're anterior to form. We're anterior to any history. We predate the light. We're the uncreated and unmanifested love, where there is no one, neither you nor I, but where everything is there. So of course, the ego will call it nothingness. The conscience will call it the trap. But the one who lives the truth can no longer be deceived by consciousness or history or by any energy, vibration, keka or condition whatsoever. It is a lot less weight and it really creates this space of freedom that nothing can approach, no certainty of this world, no certainty of any world or conscience. And you can't be deceived by that. That's impossible. As it has been said, you can only find yourself or recognize yourself. Whereas in history, even if there is a logic of action/reaction, the consequences of your actions even within this life without wanting to talk about any past life whatsoever, either you were submissive or you were free. But the compromise can no longer be maintained as it stands. Fear or love, I've said it for years. The suffering or love today, it will be more and more obvious. You decide, no one else. Even if indeed through what you call agape resonance network and especially the fire of the sacred heart, you really live that all creation is in you, in your heart. Both the enemy, the worst bastard, and the greatest love of your life are, with the same intensity, a quality, you, really. And as long as you have this feeling of resentment towards another entity, in the end, you only resent yourself, because you have not really and concretely recognized yourself. As head chief and Deborah told you, we're one in the other, there is only one conscience and all this is a dream. This does not prevent you from living your life afterward, but life has become, it flows in abundance. It has become whole and complete. And you can only see the immediate results on what you have to live, on how you approach life's challenges, whether professional or emotional, bereavement, loss, money, anything. You're at that moment in the creativity, the spontaneity of the instant. That is also why we have also developed so much, both of us, what we called a few years ago, conscious co-creation, the sacred feminine, the sacred masculine, but today, I tell you that all this is outdated. The feminine and the masculine are indeed separated on this earth, but I would tell you that in truth, there has never been either masculine or feminine. There is only one. It was all just games of conscience, dreams that passed. You were previous to creation. You're anterior, we are all anterior to any form. The Savior is within us. The Master is within us. It is not in someone's advice today or to follow any teaching whatsoever, because even today, even a totally true teaching, you have the example with AYOUN dimensions that has made you live the stars for some, the gates and countless changes, upheavals, compared to the truth, that is false. But we had to get to the gates of truth, if I can say so. Remember the great phrase that you are constantly serving, head chief. What you hold, holds you and locks you in and enslaves you. Love freely. It is not about seeing beings from afar or close. It means conceiving that the other is not the desired object, but that it is only you on another spatio-temporal line. And all the others you meet in one circumstance or another, pleasant as well as unpleasant, are only you on other spatio-temporal lines. That's all. That's all. And which at the level of the penetration of dreams, of the processes you call quantum, is lit simultaneously. And this gives billions of points of view, billions of forms, billions of stories, which constantly interact with each other. But you are all stories without exception. But you don't need to remember that, or even life the truth in the instant. But accept this not as a belief, but you will experience it instantly and you will understand it just as instantly, by living it. But it doesn't happen in the head, it doesn't happen in the energy, it doesn't happen in the vibrations. It happens in your simplest humanity by taking the brother or sister in your arms, by exchanging, by taking him against your heart, because you are going to feel the heart-to-heart really, physically. And even if the other one is not open, take him in your arms, you will feel his heart and you will feel his heart, which is your heart. Everything else is just a set from now on, everything else is just an excuse, just habits that turn by themselves out of ease, out of moral, emotional, social convention, out of the distinction of any sexuality. It's all in everything. And to live the whole in the whole is to accept that you are no more you than the other, no more you than the lover, no more you than the enemy. Accept this even without living it and it will become your instant experience. But you can't compromise with that, you can't make any conditions. Spontaneity must be lived, in the present instant, to achieve it. It has always been there, as all those who live agape tell you. We had all simply forgotten it, and we ourselves had written this a mission to allow us to explore and live all forms, all situations. Not in a time that is unfolding, not in a space that is unfolding, since it has been said and repeated, the initial instant, what you could call it, even what your scientists call the Big Bang, that never actually existed. Everything is inscribed in the present moment, the Big Bang is the end of the dream, like all dreams. But you don't need to know all the dreams, all the ins and outs. You simply have to accept that it may be the truth and you will live that it is the truth. Everything else is of no use to you, everything else is bothering you. This does not mean that you have to stop your professions, stop what you were doing, yoga or this or the trade or that. It simply means that to change, if I may say so, your shoulder rifle, to change as Baidu would say, from a point of view. Even if you can't see clearly, you'll see it clearly. Very quickly, right away. But if you put a condition in front of you, such as fear of the unknown or doubting yourself, of the unknown, is enough to paralyze the process. And of course, I am not talking about dreamers who want to dream at all costs with their visions, with their diverse and varied scenarios of the future. But do they talk to you about the love of the present instant and the living of the present moment? Take a good look. They will tell you about the archangels, they can't even tell you about agape, but do they live this state of love? If you live this state of impersonal love, you cannot make a difference between the saint, the murderer, the executioner, the victims and the savior, since it is only you and it is the truth. At that moment you are free to believe you're an individual, to believe you are the one who appeared at birth with his story and who will disappear with death, or who will return according to his karma. All this concerns the person. This is all about the dream. But that's not the truth. The truth is precisely independent of the dream. It has nothing to do with the dream except actually in the initial instant, which is nothing more than the final instant. It's a dream. You don't need to know all the Father's dwellings, but you the Father. You are both the creature and the creator without any distance and without any separation. That's what religions, pseudo-masters, gurus have tried to make you believe. You are whole on your own. You alone, understand in yourself the totality of the created, but for that you must accept that you are neither Christ nor a Savior. You carry Christ, you are Christ's children or children of man. You are the Son of Man. You're an angel, you're an archangel, you're the source, but you are also the most terrible assassin. You're also the agent just as you're the mother geneticist, without any difference. And all this, you dreamed it not elsewhere but at zero time. It's the only way to find the truth. It is that the initial moment is exactly the same as the final moment. There is only life. There is the way and the truth as long as you still believe you are a form, but when you accept that you are nothing, you discover that you are everything, and at that moment you are fulfilled. You're all whole. Nothing can be missing, even if you lack everything. And nothing can be superfluous even if you have everything superfluous. Everything is in its right place. Nothing, absolutely nothing, is the result of chance. You see, today we are a long way from everything we lived together when I was incarnate or when I broadcast, as head of the Melchizedeks and all the stories of the earth, all the possibilities of the body of eternity, the vibrations, the doors, the stars. Today all this scaffolding, is no longer necessary. It is automatic, natural and spontaneous, as soon as you are natural and spontaneous. There are no other alternatives. And you can only live and discover this. Whether you like it or not. As Eva would say, the good news has been spread. Whether you accept it or not does not change anything, you have been informed. As long as those who are still sleeping and do not want to be informed, they are also informed without their knowledge of their own free will. But don't worry, as the head chief said, about those who are sleeping. They are the ones who will wake up the easiest. Worry about yourself instead and don't worry about your children. They are much freer than you are. They will, as I have said many times, be your guides at or just before the event. Because they will be joyful, they will be light, they will live the truth, without effort. They will laugh at your postures as parents who are afraid of this or that. This is the old world. And it's not the new world, because there's no new world, there's just the truth. And when the truth is there, all that is old can no longer be maintained and all future is abolished. You are fully lucid, you are fully true and so free. What are you going to do today, for example, to know what we insisted on? Which was important at the time? What were your stellar origins? Where were the stars? Where were the gates? Where was the wave of life? What was it that the Marian channel, to make the difference between spirit consciousness, dream, sleep and Sharia? All of these were means, of course. A pedagogy that had been written. But nowadays it is no longer useful. Be true with yourself, be authentic, everything else is done by itself and doesn't need you. Your will, your energy, your vibration. She just needs your presence. And your lucidity, not about your life, but the lucidity of the moment. One more question. Voice. So there are no more written questions. Then we'll move on to oral questions. Silence. Did I put them all to sleep maybe? Voice. I have the impression. No, some of them are getting up. There is one that will emerge when he hears it no longer speaks. Laughs. Voice. Any questions? Silence. I take advantage of it, during the silence, before there are any questions, for me to play the fire of the Sacred Heart. So something is happening now, whether you are here or listening. It is the formation of the naked joy of zero time, which can be lived. Silence. As a result, their whistles were cut off, there are no more questions. But ask questions, even if it's not for you. Even if we know that the questions appear, the answers appear, which is important. The questions as well as the answers are only a setting, I would say, a way to keep you busy while that truth is being done. Nothing more than that. Silence. Voice. We are also fine without questions. What? Voice. We're fine without questions. Yes, we're fine like that, too, absolutely. Silence. It is true that you observe that there are more and more, as we speak, these moments of silence. Some of them are sleeping, of course. And then there are some who settle into the emptiness of the present instant. Silence. I think it's a little early to stop. No, we haven't been exchanging for long. We're going to let something emerge, something will necessarily emerge. I would also like to point out that, beyond the questions, you can simply testify about yourself. Because when you express what you are living, without questioning, whether it is pleasant or unpleasant things, there is also, through listening, the fire of the Sacred Heart and thus a space of resolution that opens to zero time. So don't hesitate to talk about what you're going through. Even if there are no questions. Silence. Sister, I will tell you about my experience. Voice. She will talk about her experience. So, to avoid repeating, I invite you to approach so that the microphone and I can hear you. It will avoid losing, by transcribing or repeating what you say, okay? That way, everyone will hear and it may be much more direct. Sister. So for me it is a time when I feel a little lost between the old and what I am trying to bring, to integrate into what I hear. And it goes through phases, with a lot of sadness, like a death of something. Like a death of the old one where the mind continues to cling a little bit but, anyway, it's not evident at all, to manage. Sister. To manage. I will simply answer you that everything that dies, on the surface of the dream, in this world, whether it is a relationship, whether it is a parent or even simple habits in shape, leads, of course, to what is called a bereavement syndrome. So of course, it can give you the impression of living things that are not self-evident, alternating with moments of laughter, alternating with moments of peace, and it can sometimes seem uncomfortable to fall back, I would say, into the old one. Whatever the old one is. I call old what was yesterday. The person's habits, the shortcomings of functioning, the lack and suffering, the injuries, of course. But it is precisely when you say that it is not evident, because for the moment, and as you express it perfectly, there is still and naturally a need that escapes your will to compare. There is what is old, there is what is there but not quite there for you completely, and, of course, it is destabilizing. But also accept that it is through and thanks to this kind of uncomfortable situation and even sometimes real discomforts or mental concerns that truth is really played out on the theater stage. Accept to live this, without trying to get out, in any way, and you can only get out and laugh at yourself. There is indeed a mourning to be done, but the mourning to be done, like all mourning even if they are psychologically accompanied, as you all know, for having lost someone, a child, a parent, a husband, whether he is dead or you have lost a job itself, for example. You have very well that a certain number of memories, reminiscences, whether happy or unhappy, do not change anything but come to move you in the present. And that's where you live, what's called mourning, the feeling of loss. compared to yesterday, to the character. For many, it is exactly the same thing. And besides, those of us who have had real problems of mourning in our lives to do, in this last life, of course, will have a greater difficulty, in the first instance, in living the immutability of the truth. They will move and oscillate from one state to another, which is, it must be said, extremely uncomfortable. But precisely, when you get tired of being uncomfortable, what happens? The story will be unleashed on its own. The reference to the past, to lack, to suffering, to wounds or joys will disappear by itself. This is exactly how it works when you lose a parent or child. So of course, there are brothers and sisters who will drag this out all their lives, but you know very well that grief takes a certain amount of time. This period of time also has to be accepted. But it shows you, by the same token, that there are habits, a totally automatic memory on everything you have experienced and recorded even unconsciously since your arrival in this birth and in this world, in this life, I speak. So accept not to be stable, create stability, rather than seeking stability or solving anything. Here too, the acceptance of these fluctuations, these moments of peace alternating with moments when the mind, emotions, memory, habits take over, allows you to see that you are neither one nor the other. And place you, using terminology from a few years ago, in the witness or in the observer. And the witness or observer, at some point, can only accept. And then comes the big question, who is this observer and who is this witness? It's you. It's you. That's why we called it, and especially Eba, the head chief and Baidu, the absolute I or the eternal I. What is. You have a last name and a first name in the dream. We had shown you, especially by Eba, that there was a vibratory key in the pronunciation of your identity, illusory last name and first name that contains the truth. Indeed, today, who are you? You're a human being on earth. You're in a dream body. You're in something that's going on. But you are also the one who lives all this. But you are nothing of what you are living. You are simply life. But precisely, this notion of difficulty is the coming and going. It is no longer, as I said a few years ago, the tornacote of the self with a big S. It is here that you can come and go, no matter how difficult it may seem to be at first to live the ease. When you have exhausted all the strategies, conscious and unconscious of your story, of your character, you can only notice that the truth emerges. When you've exhausted all the struggles, when you see that you cannot control or direct your character or situation, you necessarily discover that surrender to the light, sacrifice, spontaneity, zero time is much more effective than your poor little character who struggles in the dream, illusion. And everything really becomes fluid. Many years ago, we talked about the fluidity of unity. Today we are talking about the evidence of agape. But everything you are living, and especially for the brothers and sisters who seem light years away from this truth, be assured that this is the very right location. If you accept that, you are free to do so too. And you can only witness, in the first instance, those kinds of comings and goings that are the normal logic of the person and that will exhaust themselves. That you only have to look at the passage to accept, not by submitting to it, but acceptance creates the crossing and prevents you from remaining frozen on an emotion, on a story or on your mind. That's how you discover flexibility. That you put an end to the rigidity of believing you to be a character who needs to improve, who is incomplete, but that you discover the true inner fullness. So don't be alarmed, I'd say, about these comings and goings, they're just a translation of the ongoing grief. And that's what leads you to acceptance and truth. Each of us, incarnate or not, is living this challenge. Are we still in history, are we still in a form, or do we accept the naked truth? At some point, the weight, the suffering, the hesitation, the notion of choice will disappear on its own as soon as you do not pay attention to what is happening. Remember, you are the observer of what is happening, but you are not the one who lives the mind, the emotion or else. And that's healthy. That is, accepting points of view makes you independent of any energy, master, religion or belief. So, do not resent at the moment against, precisely, if you see the brothers and sisters who live in freedom and you are still living through the oscillations, the mind, the questions, the interrogations. That too, remember, it causes friction fire, and therefore, the consumption of the ephemeral. Because, when the vital body asks itself questions, it is, of course, trained by the mental body, by history, by the emotional body. And if you bring something to manifestation, to awareness, without understanding it, because you are living it, let the fire consume it. You can't help it. Accept the game, I, and you will come out of the game, of the I, and you will discover that the I, the eternal I and absolute. There's nothing else to do. Everything you think you have to do, in relation to a mood, deprives you of freedom. Let liberty be and then liberty will do it. It is the intelligence of light that will be at work and no longer your history, your person, your wounds or your memories. It is no longer time today to go and unpack your wounds. At the time, of course, years ago, we discussed this subject very extensively. Through the little devils, through habits already in place and beliefs. Through religions, spirituality. Today, all this is a scam. It's just you, it's just the present instant. Accept this fact and you will see that everything that stands out and seems to bother you today simply cannot be maintained. The observer will be totally present and he will no longer leave any door open, any possibility of hanging on to the story, the person, the wounds, the memories and all the projections whatever they may be. Do you have anything else to add? Sister, no. Thank you. One more question. Silence. Voice. A person arrives with another question. So, we're listening to you. The microphone, and me, and all of them. Sister. The character feels a great guilt about not. It seems that despite the fact that he has lived, on several occasions and for several years, joys without object, joys naked, for a short time, having lived and clearly seen, lucidly, that the absence of the character from questioning, leads to lightness and fluidity, irregular relapses and a difficulty to go through with the process. Yes. The result is great anger and guilt. How to overcome this? Why? Well, accept your anger there too, and your own anger will consume the dream. When you get tired, as I answered the previous question, of seeing that there are joys at times and at other times there is suffering, whatever the expression, I prefer the resistance which, when it sees that, when you express this testimony, who is speaking? It is the observer. Sister. Yes. If it was the person, she would say to me, I have experienced moments of joy but I am suffering. However, the way you put your words down shows you, by definition, that you are neither this character, nor what has been experienced, nor these oscillations. You are the observer, and what observes must turn to, as I said, who observes. Who testifies. And also remember that it's called mourning. And that for some, grief can last for many years. Especially among those of us who were born and very young, had this search for meaning. What is life? What is my life? How can I understand myself? They are, in general, beings and brothers and sisters who are of an exacerbated sensitivity at the energetic and emotional level. Sister, this is my case. In this case, you live through these successions of moments, the mourning of the character. Don't rhyme. Also accept that it tires the character, of course, and it's the only way to disidentify yourself as an actor on the theater stage, as a video game player. You're the one holding the controller. You're not the character who plays in the video game. And of course, the fact that it is repeating itself, is still a progression. And the more you get tired of your character, not by denying it, it's there. Not by denying it. But the more you accept it, the more joy will be there. You're not responsible for anything, you're not guilty of anything. Life has appeared, you have appeared, life will disappear, you will disappear. You're the life independent of form. You're agape, this naked love. But your character is your observer who sees both joy at times and at other times the character who is entangled in his history, in his emotions, in his history. Seeing this, living this, it is nevertheless easy for you to understand that you are the observer of this. And even if it seems to you to be subject to it, somewhere, it is also a way to mourn and cross. This crossing can be instantaneous, it can be spread out, for some already for many years. Everyone has written their dream. I remind you that everything is in its place and especially what does not seem to you to be in its place. That's the person's point of view. The observer's point of view, he notices. Even if it doesn't seem right to him, that it is like that. You describe it perfectly. There are moments of freedom, and there are moments when you are caught up by the old one. But who sees all this? The observer. The one holding the video game controller. That is to say that somewhere, despite these moments, these puffs of agape or peace or joy, no matter what words you put into it, you are no longer fooled by the character even if you are subject to it. Accept this too and you will find that your emotions, your sufferings, your lacks, no matter what you call them, can only diminish and disappear on their own. Joy grows by itself. From the moment you don't look for it. From the moment you don't try to solve but rather to accept. From the moment you stop wondering how to do it, but rather how to be about it. And then you will see the movements of your character, the movements of the story, the movements of your own wounds or joys that will pass through you and no longer stop to give you the feeling of failure or loss or suffering. It is a gymnastics of the consciousness itself. What you are describing here has nothing to do with an excess of the mind, but rather with an exacerbated sensitivity. But it is precisely this sensitivity and this experience that seems embarrassing to you today that inevitably leads you to joy. But above all, don't try to oppose yourself, don't try to do, accept and it will go through you. You see, it is always the same words arranged differently because the same process is not described in the end and ultimately always the same. Your resurrection and the purpose of this resurrection, the apotheosis of the resurrection, which is the beatitude where you recognize yourself totally, without any need for history, memory, reference or projection. At that moment, you are free from consciousness, free from spirituality, free from energy, free from everyone. You're on this world, you live fully but you are not of this world, and there are no questions about tomorrow. Immerse yourself totally in the present instant and if the present instant, there is suffering, it is because it is not just the present instant. So, there are still things to go through, there are still things to let go and, the more you agree, the more these things, to live and to go through and to let go will happen instantly and you will see that the observer, who clearly sees this, will no longer stop the processes, but will be satisfied to see them. At that moment you will be free. I would say, and Baidu had already explained it, it is a form. For the ego, we could call it divine indifference. It is much more than indifference, it is an immobility that strengthens the observer and which, at the same time, makes him disappear but it allows you, I would say, to defocus on the emotion, to defocus on your history or on your suffering, whatever it may be, but also, you decouple, you dissociate from any projection of consciousness in the next moment, in tomorrow or in 10 years, true freedom, it is only there. The usual reflex for any brother and sister when you have lived moments of peace and when the character returns to the charge through suffering or fears, do not forget that it is you who give body and give discharge, if I can say so, to this emotion that is only passing and that is how you stop it and do not let it pass. Somewhere, there is still a form of identification with history that is only a fear but magnifies, I would say, the observer. The observer will strengthen himself, you will see things clearly and, at that moment, the observer will disappear on his own, without you, without questioning. The key to everything, for the moment, which is the truth, is this principle of acceptance and not to refute as before, as Baidu said or to deny something, it is, as I said, by taking the words of Baidu, the divine indifference which is only an indifference for the ego, yes exactly. Indifference can be either denial or a form of selfishness, but indifference is also a form of overcoming. In one case, you bring even more suffering, and in the other case you immediately implement more freedom. Then I advise you to try the divine indifference, that is, non-involvement, which does not mean that you should not act or do at a given moment, but you will put the truth in front of you. It is also very simple, but it is necessary to break the circle of operating habits. It is the goal of the observer, and you have perfectly observed and described it. You are countless, to live moments of peace, moments of joy without object and already for many years, but it is profoundly different to be in this permanent naked joy where nothing disturbs, nothing of the person, nothing of history, nothing of emotions, nothing of the mind and nothing of tomorrow. You are totally available, and of the one who is not yet available because he believes, as an observer, that you will be able to oppose or solve such fear that has been seen. No, the important thing is to see it, the important thing is to accept it and certainly not to oppose it. Acceptance, seeing it, observing it, allows precisely the crossing. Therefore try to adopt the divine indifference and you will see the result well contrary to the current results where the observer notices that he is affected by what happens again and again, but that also creates a form of tension towards abandonment in the sense that Hildegard von Bingen had made use of it. All this is also part of the neuroscientific data that was explained to you by Head Chief by calling it resilience. It's the same thing. In other words, when you get tired of really suffering and not just in reaction, you will experience permanent peace. I think the Head Chief has also repeated this sentence 1,000 times. Everything you care about, you care about. Somewhere, even if it is unconscious or subconscious, you still care about form and history. Without it, you would adopt divine indifference. You would observe that an emotion is there, that you are disturbed, and you would let it pass. Remember that it is always the consciousness you put into what is going through you that creates and sustains suffering. Accept this and you will see that no suffering can be sustained. It also means that, somewhere, when you do not live the permanence of joy, but you ask yourself questions, of course, those who sleep let them sleep and those who dream of a new land let them dream, but you who sincerely question your intimate lived experience through what you tell, adopt the principle of divine indifference and you will see that any feeling of pressure, suffering, lack, the impression to live the same emotions, the same situations will disappear on its own. It is only an impression, it is like any impression, it only passes through, but it is your own positioning for which you are responsible that maintains and nourishes it. You are not responsible for what is going through you even if you have lived it, but you are responsible, in the present moment, for what you feel, and the attention you pay to this suffering, which is real, makes it even more real and literally prevents you from letting yourself go through. Years ago, the Archangel Enlil, for example, asked you to do artistic activities in reading and decoding. A long time ago, it was not only therapeutic by promoting expression and communication, but it was also a way of deriving your consciousness from something other than your little story and your little problems. Today, it is the same thing, but you do it through divine indifference and understanding that you are not the observer, any more than the one who plays on the stage, that is, the last step as Baidu would say. First there is the actor, there is the spectator watching, and until you get out of the theater to realize that there has never been theater and that all this was just a game, that you were playing in a dream of creation, that you yourself wrote. But you can't see it until you let go. You can only see it afterwards, and it is by seeing it, because you live it, that you understand it and recognize yourself. But without that, you actually spend your time for those who tend to find what they are, obviously by painful situations. You seem to do the yo-yo, but not between the ego and the mind, I would say between the actor and the spectator, between the character and the observer. Release the pressure, there is no more spectator than actor since the theater is a dream. A dream only passes. Everything that only passes is not true, because it is part of time. There's not much to achieve, if I can say, there's just something to let go. But above all, consider what should let go, but don't think about your past, don't think about the emotion that goes through you. It has its raison d'etre, and its raison d'etre is to make you live that when you get tired, really, of passing from joy to the suffering character, resilience will be acted on by itself. There, you will be totally free. It is in progress for everyone. It is the very principle of morning. Morning, I remind you, is linked to birth and death, is linked to the loss of the continuity of consciousness that has even forgotten that it was dreaming and that none of this was true. It only believes in what it sees. It only believes in what it lives within a given framework. But nothing in this given framework, which is called the earth, which I remind you is a prison, will allow you to get out of prison. You may know the constitution of the body, the constitution of emotions, the global constitution of the prison, but as long as you have not lived freedom, you know the prison, that's all. You are still playing the game of cat and mouse, or if you prefer the actor and the spectator, the ego and the character, confronted with the observer. If you agree to keep quiet, to stay quiet in this kind of situation without wanting to protect yourself from your own tears, your own suffering, your own emotions, then you're free, it is immediate. But when it happens, you can only laugh at yourself, even yesterday. As you know, all those who live agape have laughter all the time, inside and out. They only celebrate life, because they are alive, and yet, for the most part, they have not much in their lives, they are free of everything. But you're going to see, as I said in a previous question, a previous answer, more accurately, that everything you care about is held, and the more you care about something, the more you're going to suffer. You all know that. Something, as they say, that is close to your heart, prevents you from simply being the heart. All the circumstances of your lives, whatever they are, whatever you think, whether they are hateful or idyllic, do not change the matter, even if we tend to prefer the idyllic to the detestable, I grant you. All this will be gone through, and all these are only sets, pretexts, even what you describe here, to allow you to be free. Accept what is and you are. Accept the unknown and the unknown becomes known. Accept your fears and fear is replaced by love. Silence. Accepting and accepting everything that happens makes you discover that you are immutable. There is no need for a master, a guru, or energy for that. It is open to everyone today, and that is what you are all living, regardless of your age, regardless of your situation at all levels. Everything is only an excuse to live the zero time, individually and collectively. And you have nothing to expect, no date. I believe today is July 20th, and I made it clear 3 weeks ago that nothing extraordinary will happen that day. Of course, earthquakes, volcanoes, tornadoes, hurricanes, everything that happens every day with the same intensity, that's all. But it couldn't be the day of the event. It is when, globally, and when I say globally, it is not half of humanity's soul, human soul, but I would say a percentage that will experience this acceptance that the event will occur. I told you and ever told you again that you are yourself the event, you are what you expected, you're even what you sometimes feared. There is nothing else but you. Everything else is just dreams that didn't penetrate. Accepting this is already living it, and accepting it without believing it creates the experience, creates understanding and recreates freedom. Everything else takes you away from it. Remember, even what you received this year, for those who followed a little the adventures with cetaceans, you received the coat of the great mothers, you received I am you, last name and first name of the simulacrum of your identity that refers you to the sacred and to the present instant. You received everything. Moreover, it could not be received since it was already written inside you. It is an impression to have received something since everything was already written, everything is already in you. And all the others are you, not only on earth, but the angels, the archangels, the Hathakadesh, the source, Metatron, the Ekans, the geneticist mothers, whatever your personal identities may have been within this life journey. Within the dream, in the end and in truth, you have really and concretely already lived everything. You do not need to remember it, you do not need to remember it, you do not need to feel it or see it, but really and concretely to accept it, and at that moment, the end of the character and the observer and your own end, which is nothing other than the initial instant when you have joined Alpha to Omega, you realize that you have never moved, that you are nothing of what is happening and nothing of what is going through you, that you have never moved. That is the only truth and contentment that can never end. Everything else passes. happiness, and the brothers and sisters who live it and we now also can only give you the same thing, each with certainly different words. My words are not the words of Eva, the words of Eva are not the words of Bida, but, beyond the meaning of the words, there is the meaning of the word/verb and the same truth. Anything else to say? Sister, no. Thank you. Do you have anything to add to what you said? Sister, so it is normal, after what you said, to see a generalized exhaustion of the character. I also remind you of the vital fire. The etheric body is consumed and changes completely in appearance. It really and concretely becomes the body of eternity. It is no longer subjected to the vital fire. Acceptance creates vitality. It creates this new fire that burns everything without, consuming you totally of love. Only the one who passes from one state to another lives this exhaustion, but this exhaustion also accompanies the liberation from the idea of being a person. There is also the acceptance process here too, but the more you consciously and unconsciously resist, the more you will be exhausted. The more you accept, the lighter and more alive you are. It is normal, it is not a question of age, and it is independent of any process, I would say medical or pathological. Exhaustion is only the consummation of the vital body with the body of eternity which, I would say, has not yet taken up all the space. Already the previous year, in 2018, when we stopped talking, on January 29, 2018, many of you experienced moments of absence, moments of stasis, moments of sleep, moments when you were losing all your means. Of course, it was embarrassing for ordinary life for some people, but it was at those moments that you began your re-encounter with yourself. As long as there has been exhaustion, there are still unconsciously struggles between the vital fire, habits, functioning and the igneous fire, but when the vibrational and igneous fire will have totally taken over from the vital body, it is the moment when you feel the inner tremor and the wings in your back. You can only notice that it is no longer a question of being tired, it is no longer a question of being exhausted. So, I don't really like the word normal or abnormal because when you say that, is it normal or abnormal, what else is it? The duality that expresses itself, the character and not the truth. The truth is never tired. The truth can never exhaust. The truth makes you free, a total freedom. It has been explained in relation to all cycles, even in relation to the physiological need of sleeping, eating. All this no longer exists in true freedom. Therefore, it is neither nor normal, it is what is to be experienced by you. But, there too, when you get tired of being exhausted, of looking for a solution from noon to 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and you accept this exhaustion, you will no longer be subjected to it in a totally real way. But all the old techniques of knowing why, of bringing energy, compensation, a homeopathic remedy, a chemical medicine, an acupuncture needle, whatever you want, will no longer have any real purpose. From the point of view of the ongoing process, yes, it is normal. From the point of view of truth, it is abnormal. From the person's point of view, it is necessary to understand why. It is up to you to see which point of view you take, there too. Do you accept the evidence of who you are that you don't know, or are you fighting against this or the thing or the person and most often against yourself? This is the truth, the sacrifice also because, of course, as some sisters said earlier, you can only witness a form of helplessness as long as you think you are a person between the comings and goings of joy, fatigue, emotions, all these fluctuations. He who is agape can no longer fluctuate in any way. He is immutable in the truth. Life passes, it fluctuates, but he no longer fluctuates, he is in still silence, but if he speaks, whatever it does, it is a great lightness, it is a great freedom, and it is a total responsibility. Anything else to say? Voice. It is 5 o'clock. So I'll let you get some fresh air, maybe freshen up and do things that may be more enjoyable than listening to the Chief Crouton. Allow me to transmit to you all my love, peace and joy that is yours and to wish you agape. And I'll see you next time. Be well. Goodbye. Room. Goodbye. Thank you. Through Jean-Luc Young. Les transformations. English translation, LMF.